of the beloved Master to America and how he changed our lives. I'm not really sure where to begin. Oh, I brought my notes just in case I forget, so forgive me if I refer to them a bit. I guess you're wondering who I am. I'm Miss Emmeline White. I'm a school teacher in English, 9th grade girls, in Brooklyn, PS 171. There were so many of us who were touched by the Master's presence when he came to the United States. I went to one of the meetings with my friend. She said, "My dear, you must see this wonderful man." We went to the Church of the Ascension at 5th and 10th in New York City and heard him speak about Jesus, and then followed him up to West 57th Street to hear him speak again at the Carnegie Lyceum. Can you imagine? Such a small, old man with such strength and power, that he could speak so often in so many different places. Well, I simply fell in love with him. We all did, really. We talked about him incessantly. Young lady, do you know what incessantly means? It means all the time. We love to hear those stories, so I'm going to share some of them with you. Dear Juliet Thompson told me that when the Master arrived in New York, he asked Mr. Kenny to escort him to their home, where he would meet the Baha'is in the afternoon. But Juliet couldn't wait to look at him, so she talked Rhonda Nichols and Marjorie Morton into hiding on the pier with her. They tried to make themselves as small as possible. But just before the Master got into Mr. Kenny's automobile, he turned and looked and smiled. Juliet said it was like a smile from heaven. Well, here's how one newspaper described him. They said, "He is an aged man now with a long white beard and a saintly face, worn but peaceful. His bearing is simple and dignified, giving his message from a Christian pulpit to a strange audience in a foreign land with the same earnestness and naturalness as though he were addressing his disciples in Accra." To say from a pulpit is hardly correct, since he dislikes to occupy such an exalted position, preferring to put himself upon a level with his audience. Standing upon the floor or walking to and fro, he speaks quietly in Persian, which sentence by sentence is translated, though at times his expressive features and gestures make the services of an interpreter superfluous. Do you know what superfluous means? Does anybody know what superfluous means? Not me.
Unnecessary.
Thank you, young man. He wears a small white turban and a black robe over a white girdled garment. He greets the audience by touching his forehead repeatedly with the palm of his right. It's getting hot in here, isn't it? I'm going to ask you to hold my jacket for me. Thank you. Let's see. Oh, and he closes his sermon with a half-chanted prayer, standing and holding his hands upwards and open, as though ready to receive the blessings he beseeches. Just close your eyes and imagine that picture of Abdul-Baha. He was so kind to each of us, and though there was often a crowd of followers and well-wishers around him, he would still make each of us feel as though he came to America for the sole purpose of enlightening us. My good friend Bertha Clark wrote to me about her meeting with the Master and said, "At the Kenny home, there were between 300 and 400 souls waiting to receive his blessing. He came to each of us and took our hands in his with a loving greeting and a few words I did not understand. However, I felt an electric shock that went from my head to my feet. That was a day I'm sure that no one who was present will ever forget. Whenever the Master spoke, I went, almost at the cost of my position, which I had held for many years, but I didn't care if I lost my job, as long as I could see his face again. How can I explain the kind of light that he brought into our darkness? So many things we had no way of understanding until he arrived, and then he didn't merely tell us, oh no. He patiently showed us how God truly worked in our lives, how much he loved us, and how little we knew of the little we knew. He really turned our world upside down. Things we thought of as having the greatest importance, he showed us were as insignificant as dust. Little things we never noticed were given great honor and glory. How could we ever take it all in? Can you imagine how the friends wanted to please the Master? They would do anything for him and tried to give him cars, and clothing. He always refused and said that these things should be used to help the poor. But I heard of one gift that he accepted, and this story just thrilled me to my soul. You see, he had been invited to a very lavish dinner, and everyone sat down to enjoy a great feast, and Abdul-Baha was there, passing around the plates, piled high with good things to eat. Then one of the friends gave Abdul-Baha a present. It had been sent by a very poor man who lived far away, who gave the only thing he could give, his dinner. It was wrapped in a little clean cotton handkerchief, and inside was a shriveled apple and a piece of dry black bread. Abdul-Baha looked at the present and was very happy. He pushed his plate of food away and ate the old apple and the hard bread. He even broke bits of it off to share with the friends. Think of it, friends. He accepted the only gift this poor man had to offer. Surely he would then accept the poor gifts of my own foolish heart. The master loved laughter. He loved to hear it among the friends, and he would often laugh loudly and beautifully, and if I listened carefully enough, there's still bits of his laughter lingering in my heart like church bells. Be happy, he would tell us. Be happy, be full of joy. He often told funny stories. You see, even his humor taught us valuable lessons about ourselves. Everything he did was a lesson. He wanted our lives to be like his. Could we ever change enough? Now, friends, I need to tell you that we were not always comfortable with what the master told us. Each of us had our own hard burdens to bear, and it seemed he knew each of us better than we knew ourselves. What was my burden? Well, I'd never really seen a colored person before he came, and you know, to really see him as a person. There were coloreds around all the time, you know, but they were just cleaning or cooking or something. I never really thought much about them. The master said that color is nothing, and I wanted to believe him. But really, color is often something, isn't it? And you know, every time I went to see him speak, I would end up standing next to a colored person. The first times it happened, my skin just crawled, but by and by, the beauty of the master's face would take over my soul, and I would forget about anything else. I still can't believe how I reacted when I first got the news of the upcoming wedding of Louisa Matthews and Louis Gregory. It was like telling me that I could walk on the moon, or that the president was a woman. It was that impossible. I kept asking my friend Bertha if she was absolutely sure. Yes, she was sure. But where will they live, I asked. Who will talk to them? Where will they sleep? What if they get arrested? Didn't they know that in 25 of these United States it was illegal for them to be married? She was a little calmer than I was, to be sure, and more sure of the master's command. She told me that he actually instructed them to marry, and that he said, I wish the white and the colored to marry. Now, Mr. Gregory was a very intelligent for a colored. I mean, he was a lawyer and all, and a real credit to his race. And Miss Matthews was English, and you know how they are. But still, it just shook me through and through, and most of the Baha'is were stunned. I mean, it's one thing to say that color doesn't matter, but to expect me to see some people as my equal, well, I didn't know what to do. One evening, I was sitting at the Kenny home, hoping for just a glimpse of his face, or perhaps a word or two. A Unitarian minister, Mr. Howard Colby Ives, was there also, as were many others. Suddenly, a large group of street urchins came in the door, and do you know, they had been invited by Mrs. Kenny to see the master. They all smelled pretty bad, I can tell you. Probably hadn't seen the inside of a bath in their lives. But Mrs. Kenny invited them in as though they were little princes from the Orient. And the master? Well, he hugged them for all they were worth, and held their hands, and smiled and laughed. So you could almost think he was a boy himself. The last of these urchins to come in the door was a colored lad, and he hung back a little. And when the master saw him, you would have thought the King of England had come in. He raised his hand and said that here was a black rose. The smile and the tears on that boy's face almost broke my heart. Suddenly I saw how much suffering that child had endured just because of the color of his skin. And I saw the joy In his little heart, it means seen, really seen. The master then began giving the boy some expensive chocolates that had been placed in his room. They were pretty happy to have those sweets, you can be sure, but suddenly he took a very black chocolate and laid it on the table of the little black boy. Then he looked around the room at all of us with such a look of goodwill and love and humor. And all of us, the boys and his followers, we all saw what he meant, without a word being spoken. Here was the sweet in the room, he was telling us, and if we tasted this sweetness, we would find it good. That boy's eyes never left the master. That's when I decided that I would just ignore all my bad thoughts and feelings about the colored race and just do what the master said to do. It wasn't easy, as even the Baha'is had a hard time with it. But I found a colored friend, and she and I became like sisters after a while, and she even came to my apartment for tea sometimes, although my landlady threatened to send me packing. I was thrilled to be able to suffer just a little and know it was for my beloved. Everyone who saw the master was transformed in one way or another by his very presence. Some of the transformations were small, like my own. Others were earth-shattering. There was one young man named Fred Mortensen, and he had one of the roughest of lives. He was, to put it bluntly, a rascal and a thief, and ended up in jail. Although I would not mention it if he himself did not tell the story himself. Well, there he has a lawyer named Mr. Hall who tried very hard to help poor Fred. Mr. Hall visited with him and told him stories of the master. Fred listened and thought he would like to meet Abdul-Baha, so Mr. Hall told him where to go. And when he got out of jail, he left Minneapolis and he went to Elliott, Maine, to Greenacre, a resort hotel a long ways away. Fred didn't have any money. So he climbed on top of trains and sometimes underneath and traveled like that for many miles. He was a hobo. When he arrived, he was dirty and tired. There were a lot of people there to meet Abdul-Baha, many of them fashionable society people, and Fred was told to sit down and wait. Fred sat down and thought it would be a long time before the master would want to see him. But soon someone came to announce that Abdul-Baha was waiting for him. Fred had a funny feeling inside his stomach. He went up the stairs. He'd made some mistakes and he had been very bad, and he wondered if Abdul-Baha would be harsh with him. The door opened, and the master smiled at Fred. He took his hands and said, "Welcome, welcome, you are very welcome." And he asked Fred about his journey, and though Fred wished to avoid answering the question, he told him with his eyes on the floor that he had been traveling on top and underneath the trains. Then he looked up. Abdul-Baha's eyes shone. And he kissed Fred on both cheeks, gave him some fruit, then he picked up Fred's dirty hat and kissed it. Fred stayed with the master for a whole week, and you can be sure that he never did anything unworthy again. When it came time for the master to depart from these shores, we were heartbroken. Howard Colby Eyes told us a story about his last meeting with Abdul-Baha before he left. And this is what he wrote. He said, "As I approached the door where we stood still, he motioned others away and stretched his hand to me as if he'd always known me. And as our right hands met, he indicated that all should leave the room, and he drew me in and closed the door. His hand held mine in a firm grasp, and he sat down, and softly the assurance that I was his very dear son came to me. We sat in two chairs, eyes to eye, knees to knees, hands to hands, and nothing intervened between us, and he looked at me. He looked at me. It seemed as though never before anyone had really seen me. I felt a sense of gladness that at last I was home, and that one who knew me utterly, my father in truth, was alone with me. He put his two thumbs to my eyes, and he wiped the tears from my face, admonishing me not to cry, that one must always be happy. I could not speak. Turning, he grabbed me, he pulled me up, and he hugged me so tight, I think my ribs cracked. He kissed me on both cheeks, laid his arm across my shoulders, and led me to the door. That is all. But life has never been quite the same since. And dear friends, that was true for all of us who had the privilege of meeting him.